Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Reverend Tami Patzer, and I'm really excited because I am speaking with Henry DeVries. Here I practice it in my mind, and then I put the F on your V. But anyway, Henry is the creator of Indie Books International, and we were talking before we went live, and he has actually helped more than 300 people do business books. But the big thing that I thought was so impressive was the ROI that we were talking about. And that ROI can be anywhere from 400% to 2,000%. So think about that in terms of what that could mean for your business. And it's all based on things that I love, and that is books and publishing. So, Henry, tell me a little bit more about how you got started being an indie book publisher.
So I was a ghostwriter, and somebody called me one day, Tami, and said, is this Henry DeVries? I said, yes. Henry DeVries, the ghostwriter? And I said, well, yes, that's me. And he said, well, my story takes place at midnight on October 31st at a seance in an old mansion, and they're trying to contact the spirit of the former owner who had died. And I said, well, I got to stop you right there. I'm not that type of ghostwriter. So I was assistant dean for continuing education at the University of California, San Diego. I was also on the adjunct faculty for marketing. And my side job, one day a week was helping people write these books. And they got frustrated when it came time to publish them. And I would give them advice, but they faltered. And so I went into the dean of the university. I was 56, and I said, I love the university. I love working here. I, for some reason, love these consultants who want to get these books out more. So I'm retiring. That took a 2-day conversation, but I retired. I stayed on board as a consigliere. They call me from time to time for advice, and then opened Indie Books International. And the mission was to be the Henry Ford of consultant books, so that, like, Henry Ford wanted an automobile to be within reach of every American. I want a book that helps attract high-paying clients to be within reach of every consultant in America.
Wow, that is really fascinating. I love that because I also have a background in teaching, and it's interesting when I meet other people from that background. So you actually help people then to ghost write their books, edit them, get them ready, and then you take them through the publishing process. So how can the person you're trying to help actually write a good book or author a good book?
We need to take the expertise that's inside their head, Tami, and get it out on paper. And every consultant I've worked with has a hidden asset that they didn't know they had. And it's my job to help them find that hidden asset. And the hidden asset is something that no one else has, and that's their defining stories. And I teach them in 2 minutes or less how to build trustworthiness with a prospect by telling a story where they took somebody from being in a mess to success. And we put those into the book.
Oh, okay. You teach them this in 2 minutes or less, how to go from tell a defining story where they take somebody, one of their clients, from a mess to success. And how long are these books typically that you help people produce?
My lighthouse recommendation to a consultant, the lighthouse meaning guide, this should guide you, is 20,000 words. This is what Ken Blanchard is doing. and he's sold 20 million books, so he knows a thing or two about business books. But also people like Marshall Goldsmith and Brian Tracy. That's the attention span. We call it an airplane book because C-level executives, who most of my authors are trying to reach C-level executives, their attention span is they'll skim a book from the time it takes to go from one tarmac to another tarmac. So we call it an airplane book. And that should give them enough information to say, I think I need to talk to this person. They know what they're talking about.
Yes, I've been a reader of airplane books myself. So when you're working with your authors, how do you help them come up with stories that persuade? Because you just said when you're reading that book on an airplane, you want to be able to get enough out of it that you're persuaded to actually say, hey, I'm going to contact this person.
Yeah. There are 8 great stories that human brains are hardwired for. Research in the neurosciences tell us that people don't make decisions logically, they make them emotionally. So how do we reach the emotional part of the brain? There are 8 stories. It's classic. People have known this for thousands of years, that there are 8 stories people are hardwired for. There's the overcoming the monster problem story. There's the underdog rags to riches David versus Goliath story. There's the comedy solution to a problem. There's a tragic solution to a problem. Those are cautionary tales that you don't want to do. There's a mystery. There's a quest after a prize. There's a rebirth or comeback or redemption story. And then there is the escape story. When you're in a normal place, you go to crazy town, and then you escape that and you get back to normal. So I help my authors with each of their stories that they're telling on which of the 8 stories it is and what language they need to put in there, what beats they need to hit. And overarching, what's the overarching story that you're telling in your book? Is this a overcoming a monster problem book, or is this a mystery solved, cracking the code kind of book? Or is this a redemption, the Phoenix Rising, the comeback story? So I help them with that too.
So every story, you don't try to get all 8 into the one book. You try to choose one, and then they make that into the full circle of a book. One of the things that you talk about is that you help people get in front of, number one, their ideal client, but also their high paying clients. What is the best way to attract high paying clients? That's what everybody wants to know.
Sure. What if I told you there was no one way, but there are 7 ways, and the magic is in the mix? So the 7 ways to attract a high paying client, and by definition, for me, that's 5 figures, people who will pay you 5 figures or more. It's not the $300 pest control company solution. This is something of more substance. So the combination is, and I'll go in rank order, the best thing you can do is do small scale seminars. You can do them live. I'm doing one in live July 30th, 2021 in Chicago. I'll be live in front of a small group, or you can do them online. So I do a Zoominar every month. I've got one coming up on July 15th about how to be an expert in 30 days. So small scale seminars, 5 to 10 people, interactive. You're responding to their questions. It's going back and forth. Number 2, know who your target rich environment is, know who congregates them, and then be a speaker with valuable how-to advice on how to give them what they want. I discovered what my independent consultants want is more impact and influence. I talk about high-paying clients, money in the bank. That's secondary. My people really want impact and influence. So I tell them how to get that when I give speeches around the country. I'm actually getting booked to do live speeches again in 2022. Everything's been virtual during the pandemic. So I hope we're getting back to the former times. Number 3 is get published. Get published in something that your target audience reads and give them how-to information. I've worked my way up. I'm now hired by Forbes.com to write 5 columns a month on business development. And I interview people and I share their stories on how they're solving problems to attract those high-paying clients and have more impact and influence. Number 4 and number 5 are related because you need to find associations who gather your target-rich environment. For me, one group was the Institute of Management Consultants. So the 4th best thing you can do is to do volunteer work, typically being on the membership committee or the program committee and helping that group. So I've helped put on conferences for the Institute of Management Consultants for years. 5 is networking. A lot of people thought, well, during the pandemic, networking's dead. It's not. It morphed. I always allow networking opportunities in the meetings that I put on. I put on meetings. I hire speakers. I sell seats to it. And part of it is always to have networking because that's so important. Okay. Number 6 is you've got to get your internet game plan together. That usually means 2 things. 1, YouTube. You've learned that. We've got to put more on YouTube. We've got to have short videos on YouTube of under 2 minutes. We've got to have 5-minute where you rock a short talk video. You can have your 45-minute presentation on there too. It's a variety of things, but the more you can have about how to problem solving information, the better. Also LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been a key for us to attract people into our Zoominars. Our Zoominars are no cost, no selling, no kidding. And we teach our authors to do the same thing because we think you shouldn't be any more than 30 days or at least 90 days from an opportunity for somebody to hear your expertise to help them solve their problem. So that could also be a podcast. It could be a number of things, but you need to have that. LinkedIn can help get people to it. LinkedIn, when it's done properly. A lot of people are trying to spam on LinkedIn and automate it. That's not the way to go. You should build honest connections with people on LinkedIn. What do you have in common? And then you can make them offers if they would be open to attending a meeting you're putting on. So somebody, Tami, their first reach out to me on LinkedIn was, would I like to hire them to be my life coach? I don't even know the person. And that's like the first time you see a woman. Would you like to get married? We can talk about the details and the particulars. It's like, it's crazy. People are doing crazy things. So you need to be doing sane things on LinkedIn. And then the 7th thing you can do is put on paid workshops. Workshops where people would actually pay money to hear what you have to say. The secret weapon for that is you need to do research on how they compare to their peers. I'm just coming out with a new book this year called Rainmaker Confidential. During the last year, I've interviewed hundreds of professionals and consultants and saying, what are you doing less of? What are you spending money on less now? What are you spending more money on? What are you going to beef up? What's your go-to strategy? Now, that's something that you can't talk to all these other people, but as a gatherer of information, an author, a columnist, a speaker, I can do that and then share the results with my target-rich environment. So those are the 7 things you can do.
Yeah, every single one of those is really good, and you actually touched on, again, some of my favorites: podcasting, YouTube videos, and again, being the reporter or somebody who is the information gatherer, just like what you said. And then you said that about LinkedIn too. That's one of my personal pet peeves about LinkedIn, is that so many people have tried to use it in the automated fashion without ever actually trying to talk to you as a person. I've received odd invitations because they saw one word maybe in my profile, and they assumed that I was like, somebody else because they didn't actually read anything about me. Another thing, we talked earlier when I first introduced you about the return on investment. Can you give me an example of somebody that you've worked with who's actually gotten a 20x ROI on their investment?
I certainly can. Actually higher. So the year is 2015. The place is Memphis, Tennessee. We're in an 800 square foot apartment with Penny Reed. And she's at her kitchen table, and Penny is staring at a stack of bills she has no idea how she's going to pay. That 800 square foot apartment was a far cry from the 4,000 square foot home she used to share with her husband, who was also her employer, who also gave her all her client work. No house, no employer, no client work. Penny's a remarkable woman. And she thought, well, if you're going to dream, dream big. So she said, in 2 years, I'm going to be a best-selling author, a professional speaker, and I'm going to make $200,000 a year. That's when she met me. And I said, Penny, tell me, what do you know how to do better than anyone else? She says, oh, I got that. I help dentists. And let me tell you, dentists are screwed up people. They borrow all this money to go to college. Then they borrow all this money to go to graduate school. Then they borrow all this money to open a practice. And they think they own a business. A business owns them. They're an indentured servant to that business until they get it paid off, or they can trick somebody else into buying it from them. But I know how to give them cash flow and time to enjoy life. And I said, bingo, we got a business model. She goes, that's it. I know how to grow a dental practice. So she goes, what's going to be the sexy title for my book? And I said, oh, I got it. Are you ready? She said, yeah. I said, write this down. She said, okay. Growing your dental business. It's what they want, and it's what you know how to do. And Penny said, oh, so we're going to write this book, and then we're going to publish it, and then I'm going to give speeches, and some people at the speeches want to talk to me, and then they hire me. I said, oh, no, that's not how it's going to work. I said, we're going to start writing the book right away, and you're going to make at least one phone call a day. She said, who am I going to call? I said, people who book speakers to talk to dentists, and dentists who might hire a consultant. She said, oh, I'm going to run out of people to call in a week. I said, no, you're not. There's a million of them out there. They're multiplying like rabbits. Just go. Penny started making her phone calls every day. We did the book. We got the book published in about 4 months. So the book's published. But meanwhile, she's getting booked for two things. One, to give speeches to dentists, and two, to work with dentists to give them more cash flow and time to enjoy life. I'm going to fast forward to 2 years. Penny Reed is at her computer. She's looking at her QuickBooks financial statement for the year, and she hits print, comes off the printer, and she reads under gross revenues, $200,000. $100,000 from speaking, $100,000 from consulting. So we went from 0 to 200,000, but with what she spent, that was a 2,000% ROI. Now, Penny gave me permission to tell you that story on 2 conditions. 1, don't make my ex-husband the villain of your story. He's not. We just didn't want to be married anymore. She's happily married to a wonderful man now. 2, she says, you need to tell them that now it's $280,000 a year. Penny's business was so successful, she was bought out by a larger company in the field. So a nice success story on that. So that's how doing all these things that we talk about, writing, speaking, and consulting and training can lead to a 400 to 2,000% ROI.
That's really remarkable. And I think another thing that's important with that is that it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like she thought that, oh, if I do this in a couple months, I'm going to have this. It was actually, it happened over time. And I think that's important for people to realize that a book, many people think that writing a book, they're going to make all the money from selling the book. And you just made the point. She didn't make the money from selling the book. She made the money from using her book as a leverage tool with her speaking and her consulting. And I think that that's always important that people understand that. Tell me more about the impact and influence. How does writing a book or publishing a book help you make that big impact and that influence?
Let me go back to my university days. I was in charge of continuing education, which meant I had, and public programs. So I had speakers come in all the time. Two speakers approached me. One says, I have something interesting to say. And the other person says, I'm the author of this book and I have something interesting to say. Which one am I going to hire? It's a no-brainer. The person with the book. The person with the book every time. A book is your number one marketing tool, and speaking is your number one strategy to find the clients, because it's sampling you, Tami. It's like, oh, I get to hear what you're like. Right now, people are sampling me. They're sampling you. They're getting a sense of, well, what would it be like to work with Tami? What would it be like to work with Henry? Oh, I get a sense from this because I hear them speaking, I see them. And from our YouTube videos, I always say, you're going to impact more people who hear about your book than read about your book. You sell enough copies of the book to pay for the cost to help prepare and publish the book. It's basically a break-even proposition. If you do the basic things I teach, which is speak monthly, send 20 copies of a book out a month, those are just, the basic. If you're doing the basics, you can sell 1,000 copies of the book and that'll pay for the effort. The real ROI is what happens as a result of people hearing you, seeing you, experiencing you, and hearing other people talk about you.
As I'm listening to you, you're seeing me nod my head. Yes, yes, yes. And I keep thinking about, not only can people use a book if they're trying to reach out at that C-suite level, but the books are also useful like in your local hometown, like at the Chamber of Commerce, if you are trying to, like you said, do things that on a more local level, because most people aren't writing or producing books about their areas of expertise. So that's really interesting to me. And it makes me think about thought leaders and people, and again, you said it, people with a book who, if one person says, I'm a great speaker, this person says, I'm a great speaker and I'm also the author of a book, the odds are the author is going to be the winner in that case. How does being an author help you to really project that you are a thought leader, and how do you view that?
Yeah. Thought leaders do two things, Tami. They type and they talk. So that's about writing and speaking. So the books aren't easy. Let's get real on this. It takes work to write a book, even a 20,000 word book. And I say writing is a team sport. It's good to get a developmental editor. That's my favorite thing to do, is where I help co-create a book with somebody. They have the content. I know how to package it. So you co-create that book and it's out there. Well, that can be a door opener for you. You send a copy of the book to somebody and say, if you're interested in having a conversation about having me speak to your group, that would be great. And so they're going to want to go to YouTube to see, well, what's she like? oh, there, okay, she's presentable and she makes sense. We could put her on the stage. It's a great combination. So the more speaking you do, the more you're a thought leader. I also say a thought leader is not one and done on a book. Like, you can't put everything you have to say in a book. I'm coming out with my 14th book. And some people say, well, why didn't you just write one big book? You mean like a 1,000-page book? This is like a weapon. It's not inviting for people to read. I broke it up into 20,000 word segments there so people can get different aspects of it. And my research is never over. I keep doing research. That's what a thought leader does. A thought leader is looking for new ideas to present. And they just don't go to the top of a mountain like a guru and wait for divine inspiration. They're out there researching, talking to people. They're out there amongst them. And the best time for an author is not when their first book comes out. It's when their second book comes out. And you know why, Tami? It's because when somebody says, oh, I'd like to read your book, you can say, oh, which one?
I like that. And I can just hear people right now and they're saying, well, that's great, but what if I don't like to write, Henry? What do I do? How do I write a book if I'm not a writer? I hear that a lot.
Sure. Get help, either as a ghostwriter, which I do for more like company presidents of substantial companies. They should not be spending their time writing, no matter how good a writer they are. They need to be interviewed and then have a professional writer turn something out. I mean, and that's what, Jack Walsh and Bill Gates and these people do. Now, the next thing is, can you talk? Are you a speaker? Well, then you outline the book and you talk it into a recorder, and then you have a service that does transcriptions for 25 cents a minute. Transcribe it. Now you have your first rough draft. I even have a class for 365 that includes a 3-hour class I work with like a handful of people, 5, 6, and we create an outline for their book, and then they get a one-on-one meeting with me and we refine that. And a lot of times they have enough to go and get that done, or they have some sort of help either on staff or another person that they can bring in. I've helped independent professionals this way, attorneys and doctors. I've helped, people who have, a substantial practice really can't afford to be spending the time. They need to delegate it out. So I work with them on how to get that done. So you can get it out of your head, down on the paper. You don't have to, sit yourself down, seat of the pants to the seat of the chair until this drudgery is done. There are many other ways to get a book done these days.
I agree with you that, and I think where you're working with you, Henry, where I could see a big value of working with you is where you help them to develop that framework so that they're not intimidated by talking the book out or doing that. Because if you have that framework from you as a professional and you're saying, yes, this is the way a book should be put together, here's what you do, and allocate whatever time you have, maybe it's 15 minutes a day, but you can answer questions or expand on thoughts and ideas in 15 minutes a day. That all adds up. And, in a month or so, you would have a substantial amount of time. And 20,000 words, if you think about that, that isn't too many words. It isn't like you're writing, the great American novel, but it's enough, but not too much. It's very doable if you were somebody who needed to chunk it up with little amounts of time. And then, of course, with your professional expertise with the editing, a lot of people get caught up in that part of it because maybe they can't spell, or their grammar is not good, or of course the formatting, all of the little nuances and details of a book. That's what I see will sometimes shut people down in this creative business process. And another thing I think that's important is that people understand you're talking about writing a book that's going to attract those high-paying ideal clients. I think that's important. It isn't that you're writing a novel or a work of fiction, which is a whole different genre, in my opinion. So what is the number one marketing tool that people can use?
It's a book, a certain kind of book, though. The book has to be in alignment with what you offer. Who do you work with, and what problem do you solve? This book needs to be about that. So for Penny Reed's example, she wanted to work with dentists. Their problem was they needed to grow their business to make enough revenue to have the cash flow that they needed. So she solved the problem. How do you grow a dental business? And broke it down into systems and easy steps. And that's what most independent consultants already have. They have expertise. But a consultant without a book is like a movie without a marquee. Nobody knows what's playing. Nobody knows what's in there. The book is the best. People say the best calling card or the best brochure. What's a business card? I haven't used one of those in 2 years. But I've used a lot of books, and I've sent a lot of books out even during the pandemic. So the book speaks to your expertise. I have a great story about one of our clients got hired for a major 6-figure deal. The CEO loved his book. And when he met with the CEO, he said, well, that's so nice of you to say, what part of the book did you love so much? And he says, oh, and he described something in the book. And the author consultant wisely kept his mouth shut, because what he was talking about, the CEO was talking about page 2 of the book. Obviously, the CEO got to page 2 and go, hire this guy, let's bring him in. So that's some of the magic of the book too.
Well, that just proves that whatever was on page 2 was very impressive. So if a book is the number one marketing tool, what is the number one marketing strategy?
And the book opens the door to speaking. So whenever you can get in front of an audience of your target-rich environment, then that is the strategy, because people need to experience you. And frankly, people aren't much of readers anyway. I do come in sometimes and somebody has a dog-eared copy of my book with some Post-it notes and things like that. That's rare. I know most people skim it, but they heard me speak or they heard me on a podcast. I'm happy to do podcasts. I get clients when I do podcasts. And here's my offer to your listeners. If anybody wants a free strategy call with me, no obligation, no selling, just talking about your book idea. I'll help you get clarity on your goals and your hidden assets and the roadblocks ahead of you and how others have gotten past those roadblocks. If you want that call, I'm happy to do it. You can find me at indiebooksintl.com. Okay, so
perfect.
Thanks. That's what I train people to do. You should be offering free strategy calls with prospects. Whoever paid over $1,000 for something without first having a conversation? It's rare. People want to have a conversation. So offer them a conversation. I always say, if you're open to a conversation. I never say, if you're open to a sales call, because I don't make them. I'm helpful to people. I'm generous with information. Our brand is generosity. And I believe that prospects are smart enough to figure out if working with us would be in their best interest or not. And those who figure that out, they sign up. And those who were not a good fit for it, because we're not right for everybody, they look for somebody else. I might tell them where to go to look for other people too. I just think the more helpful you are with people, it comes back to you in different ways. I mean, call it karma, call it kismet, call it what you will. But if you help somebody out, then they might not work with you, but somebody might talk to them, and the 4 magic words in the English language might come up. And those words are, I know a guy. And that's also, we don't say I know a gal, but we say I know a guy. Name is Tami. So it happens both ways with the 4 magic words. My mom was from New York, so I certainly understood it. The way she said it was, hey, don't worry about it. I know a guy. So it's that thought that you'll hook them up with somebody. So often, right now, 2/3 of my business is referrals. When we started 7 years ago, nobody knew us, and our LinkedIn database was 0. Yeah, we were scrambling to find clients. But then, as you are generous and you do work and you speak to these people, now we have over 13,000 people on LinkedIn with us, and I have an opt-in newsletter of over 2,000 people a week are looking forward to getting a tip from me. So you build it.
Well, this is what I know about our short conversation today. You've given at least, I think, 25 different tips, tricks, and tools, probably more than that, just in the short time we've been speaking. And I highly recommend that everybody go back and actually take notes if you weren't taking notes, because Henry, you were dropping a lot of really good, valuable information that, and I bet there were a lot of people who are going, oh, I never would have thought of that. Because a lot of times we think that people think the way we do. And then what I always find out is that most people don't think the way we do. And like I was just listening to you and I'm thinking, wow, what a wonderful, talking about books as marketing tools, speaking as your marketing strategy. And immediately when you talked about the book, and when you were talking about LinkedIn, and you said that someone reached out to you and said, hey, let me be your life coach. And I was thinking to myself, that life coach needs a book. Because then they could have reached out to you and said, hey, I'm the author of this book. Would you, I'll send you a copy of my book or something. But I just kind of, for some reason, that's how my brain connected with that, was that all of these different people, coaches, entrepreneurs, even the local brick and mortar people could use a book to really create a foundation for their expert status in the community. And then I really loved it when you were talking about using YouTube and videos and all of the different links, because if you did that, what I really love about podcasts, for example, is many of the books I've put together are direct results of podcast interviews. And so that's another way that somebody could put together a book. They could go back, if there've been someone who's been a guest on a lot of shows, and transcribe all those shows. And I bet you they would come up with a lot of themes and topics that they're always talking about if they didn't have any other method. And then they could talk to you, Henry, and say, hey, Henry, I've got 100,000 words all based on these topics. Help me. Help me put it together so that it actually makes sense. Because I think that's what a lot of people need. They need the affirmations from an expert about, well, how do I tell my stories? Which stories should I tell? And I'm sure we could, have many more conversations about all of these. Also, if you could repeat how they can reach out to you again, I'd really appreciate that.
Oh, sure. So my email is henry@indie, INDIE, books, BOOKS, intl.com, short for international. That's my email. But you could also go to the indiebooksinternational.com website, and there's information on how to reach me there. And, very happy to have conversations with people. You can, if you contact me through LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn, Henry DeVries, DeVries, a Dutch. When Grandpa hit Ellis Island, he wasn't hip to the jive of what was going to happen the next 100 years. He probably should have just renamed our family something short, sweet, and American. So then I wouldn't have to spell my name all the time or have it mispronounced in restaurants back in the day when we used to go to restaurants.
Or on podcasts, because people like me who try to sound it out, and no matter how I move my mouth, it still comes out not sounding quite right. But
you were great. Oh, you were great.
So before I let you go, Henry, do you have one last little gold nugget that you'd like to share?
The number one thing to do to attract clients is to hold small scale seminars, 5 to 10, 4 to 8 people. I didn't invent this. It came out of the Harvard Business School, and they got it from McKinsey Consulting. And I've interviewed McKinsey people on the strategy. It's just a way to be generous with your time, help people with their problems. And the more people you help in general, the more you'll get hired for specifics.
Wow. The more people you help in general, the more people who will hire you for specifics. Okay. That is a gold nugget. So everyone, this is Tami Patzer. Like I said before, go and listen to this again, take copious notes, and contact Henry and take advantage of that conversation with him. So again, this is Dr. Reverend Tami Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.